Partial application is a technique very similar to currying. You're transforming functions by binding certain arguments. This makes the function more specialized and at times easier to use when applying a functional paradigm, just like with currying. Now, the main difference between currying and partial application is that with currying, we are producing multiple unary functions, meaning each function produced only takes one argument. With partial application, we are partially applying some of the arguments. The resulting function may or may not be unary. Like currying, this is an important concept to be aware of, but we can cover it pretty quickly. So let's go ahead and look at an example. So we have here a function, compose results. It takes a string, an amount, and a max, and then it returns basically a string that includes those three parameters passed in. So 3 parameters here. Now, currying would make 3 functions, each taking a single argument. With partial application, we're going to apply one of these. We're going to go ahead and set up a default string, and then the others will allow to be passed in. So the resulting function will take 2 arguments instead of the 3. And it will be more specialized because it will have this string already established. So that's what we're going to do. And I'm going to set the function up in final score message. So this is going to be a message for a final score of some sort. And we're going to call compose results, the function up there. And we are going to use the bind method of functions. Now, the bind method, in the past when we've talked about it, it allows us to bind the keyword this to a function. So it already has that. Well, if you remember, bind also allows us to assign arguments, pre-bind arguments to that function. And that's really what we're going to use it for. We're not going to use it for binding this. That's not important in this particular application. We're not worried about that. What we want to do is to bind the arguments. And so we're going to use bind. And then since we're not worried about the keyword this, what do we pass in? Well, we just pass in a null value. That's all we need to do. Now we can go ahead and pass in the arguments. And those arguments start from the left. We're going to go ahead and bind the string argument. And what are we going to put there? I'm just going to put you earned a score of, and that's what is going to be bound. And so we won't have to enter that particular argument. We'll only need amount and max in this returning function, the final score message. All right, so we've done that. Now let's go ahead and declare a variable, let result equal final score message. And all we need to pass in is an amount, so 75, and a max amount, so 75 of 100. That's basically what we're going to pass in there. A score of 75 out of possible of 100. All right, so let's go ahead and save that and take a look at our results in the result variable there. And there we go. You earned a score of 75 out of 100. So what we did is we created a function here, final score message, which had part of the variables bound to it. And so it made it more specialized. It made it a function that's specifically going to return a message, you earned a score of, and then we can pass in those 2 numbers to get that final message. Now, what if this function, this one up here, accepted a name as well? Say up here we had a name. How would we deal with this to create a new function using partial application? We'd want to provide the string, and maybe we'd want to provide a max number as well. Maybe we want to create one that is always 100 or something. But there's variables in between. It's not each variable from the left like we could deal with bind. So dealing with something like that makes it difficult to use bind. We wouldn't be able to use bind for that particular application. Now, once again, libraries like Lambda, underscore, Lodash have partial functions That's actually the name of the function, that allow you to specify which arguments are provided. For example, to partially apply a particular function, you would call the partial function and you would pass in variables that will have a value. And for those variables that you do not want to partially apply, you would pass in an underscore. And those would be the values that would be provided later. It would return a function. You would then use that function. That would be your new function you've created that has some values partially applied. Now, it's also possible to create a function like this in JavaScript that would do the same thing, where you could pass in some of the parameters and not all of them. And it would be just like those libraries. In fact, those functions in the libraries were created using JavaScript. But we won't be diving into that here. That's a little bit beyond what we're going to deal with here. So, partial application is similar to currying. And sometimes you will hear them referred together, but technically there is a difference, as we have explained here. All right, let's go ahead and move on.